So some special topics about common operational questions. We get a question often about seed to sale data, point of sale data. What we call it is I need metric. So what is metric? Why would you or would you not need metric? What is its role? So it's become something we've heard a lot. I was told I need the metric data, but what does that mean? And is that something you actually need? Well, let's talk about that a little bit. So what is metric? Metric is one of several seed to sale systems. In some states, they're called track and trace, seed to sale. It's the same kind of idea. It is a system whereby the moment a seed is planted in the ground and pops up, all the way to the point where it is sold at a dispensary, you physically track where it goes and the cost associated with sales. So every state or territory has the ability to choose their own. There is no mandated one from the federal level. There wouldn't be. As you see at the bottom, the names that you'll most likely see, because they're the most common ones out there, are METRC from Florida, BioTrack, which is also from Florida, and MJ Freeway or Leaf Data Systems. But METRC is clearly the one that is seen most around the country. So a seed to sale system performs two primary roles that we mentioned earlier on. It helps monitor for the diversion of product in the supply chain, and it helps the state or territory collect revenue information for tax purposes. Now, the reason why I highlight this is that what they deal with is aggregate data. So when we talk about the need to understand where cash comes from individual transactions, that's not really the role of seed to sale, because the state is less interested in the individual transactions as they are in knowing, an aggregate of how many pounds of a product were sold. How many dollars did you bring in from that large aggregate sale? Really what they're looking at is making sure that, if 15 plants were grown, at the end, 15 plants worth of product was sold, and how much was sold, so that we know how to tax you efficiently. And so I pasted that image that you saw earlier on this slide about that supply chain. So that supply chain is where seed to sale software is used. Cultivator puts a tag on a plant. When they send it to a manufacturing facility, they write a note in the software to say, send it to manufacturing, and on, all the way down to the ultimate sale. Many financial institutions feel they need this information because this is what the state gets. However, what we encourage is that you pull your information from the point of sale system or the invoice and accounting system, because this is really about the individual sales, whether these sales would conform with state law. This gives you the details you need to be able to drill down and say, that was a purchase of 5 grams of X product, and this is the price. Is this a price that makes sense? Is this not a price that makes sense? How does that compare to other folks in the area? So the point of sale is used to manage that retail inventory. It validates that purchase against limits imposed by regulatory authorities or physician recommendations. So a cannabis point of sale system actually has a bit of a compliance function built into it. Usually you are required in a point of sale system, if you're at a dispensary, to enter in the birth date of the person that's purchasing the product so that you can demonstrate that they were of age. You may, in medical states, have to refer back to a physician recommendation. So most states have what's called purchase limits. So if you are in the state of Connecticut, for instance, and you're a medical patient, you are not allowed to purchase more than 3.5 ounces of marijuana within a 30-day period. So a point of sale in Connecticut needs to have a way for them to track whether you have exceeded your limit or not, because if they sell you something and you're over your limit, they would be breaking the law. So there is a compliance function built into these point of sale systems. Just so you know some of the name brands as you start looking at the industry and talking with folks, the top 5 point of sale vendors last year for cannabis were Greenbits, BioTrack. So BioTrack is not just seed to sale, they also have a module which is a point of sale. There's FlowHub, there's MJ Freeway, just like BioTrack, they have a seed to sale, but they also have a point of sale and LeafLogix. METRC does not have a point of sale. Also, if you're in like one of the processors or growers and you're not doing individual sales to people, you need access to the invoicing and accounting systems, to make sure that if someone is selling a product to another company that both are licensed, that they're selling products they're allowed to sell, you can pull this information from QuickBooks, Sage Intacct, etc. Stacy, was there anything you wanted to comment on in this kind of conflation of seed to sale and point of sale and what data is necessary when and why?
I think, a lot of times when we're working with clients, there's some confusion at the examiner level as well. I think that because seed to sale is a common terminology, metric is a common terminology, a lot of folks think that that's where they need to go to get the sales activity, but that doesn't really show you what you need to demonstrate that these are legal sales, because what that shows you is bulk information. By looking at these point of sale and invoicing information, you can get information about who is purchasing. So for an example, you can say on an invoice that this grower sold to this seller, and if I want to go verify that that seller is a licensed business in my state, I can do that. You wouldn't have that at the seed to sale or track and trace or at that level. With the point of sale systems, as I chatted about a little earlier, they're documenting that they've verified the age of the purchaser, that they've entered the medical marijuana ID, that they have checked those limits. So all of those things are in that point of sale data. Those things are not at that seed to sale level. So I think shifting the industry's understanding, particularly the financial industry's understanding of what data they need, is really important.
All right. So how does data get into a seed to sale system? This is just a very quick flow chart to show you that there's two general ways. There's manual entry into seed to sale, and there's software integration. So in a manual entry system on your day-to-day at a dispensary or a grower, you're using software already. But then to get it into the state system, you would have to manually run a report and then either upload it or even in some cases manually enter the data into their system. And we know that anytime there's another link in a chain, there's a potential for data to be adjusted accidentally or intentionally. So one really wants to pull out as many manual steps as possible. In a software integration environment, these point of sale systems and these accounting systems often have built-in connections with the seed to sale systems. So METRC is actually METRC, BioTrack, MJ Freeway. There are ways that you can connect your point of sale software or your accounting software directly to it so that that's automated in the back end, and there's less potential for error. We consider those point of sale softwares and accounting software to be the source of truth. So just as you can get automatic uploads to seed to sale from those systems, you can get the same data that feeds the seed to sale systems by connecting to the point of sale or the accounting software just like they do. So if it is very important that you get seed to sale data, understand that they would be getting it from the exact same source that you would if you go back to the point of sale or the accounting software. Next, it's something that comes up, site visits. Sometimes we hear, I need to do a state level supervisory exam, or, well, it's very common that folks ask, do I need to do a site visit? Well, there was some issues in the last couple of years in terms of social distancing and things like that, whether people could go on site. But now that that's opening up, do I have to go on a site visit? What do I need to do on a site visit? The FinCEN guidance doesn't give you any notion of how extensive that should be. Consequently, there are some financial institutions that say, well, I can't bank cannabis because I can't drive 3 hours out there, or I don't have the time or the expertise to do like a 3-hour exam. Like, how do I know if their security cameras are in the right place? Well, we would encourage you to understand that the FinCEN guidance doesn't put that burden on you. The ultimate authority in terms of whether this business is complying with state law or not is the state regulatory agency. So the state has really, really extensive inspections that it does. It goes into every single physical and sort of virtual nook and cranny of these businesses. And we've collected a couple examples over time. I just wanted to show you, for instance, Oklahoma. Their state inspection form is 9 pages. It goes into multiple categories and categories that don't really directly affect you. Things like their waste program or their advertising, things like that, their packaging and labeling. These are all things that the state is looking for, that the state is examining. If you were to go and try to do this, then the examples are out there, but the only people truly qualified to make those assessments are the state. So if you were to go out, then you can collect information to the best of your ability, but you would still not ultimately necessarily arrive at the same conclusion that the state would. Montana has a 17-page inspection form that goes into all sorts of other areas like transportation, waste, things like that, general facility, advertising, things that really don't have an impact on your relationship with the financial institution because the state is the regulator of those businesses. What you need to know is whether the sales that are happening are the result of state legal sales. FinCEN actually encourages you to look at things this way. So early on, I showed you several of the BSA expectations regarding marijuana-related businesses. We talked about making sure you request information from the state, develop an understanding of the normal and expected activity of the business. But the piece that I added here in bold at the end, FinCEN says, with respect to information regarding state licensure obtained in connection with such customer due diligence, a financial institution may reasonably rely on the accuracy of information provided by state licensing authorities, where states make such information available. Now, what we have come to understand from this is that ultimately, if the state says that this business is compliant with the rules of the state, then you can accept that. By virtue of them being licensed, it means that their facility conforms with the rules of the state, that their beneficial owners are not felons. That's why I would encourage you, I showed you that example from Michigan, I would encourage you to go and look at the requirements in your state or territory. What is being collected? What does a person have to have in order to get a license? You don't need to repeat those pieces because by virtue of that business being licensed, the state has attested that this has been done, and you can rely on the accuracy of what the state says has been done. But site visits are not a bad idea. So what do we recommend? Well, one of our other founders is a man named John Gadea. So John Gadea actually created the medical marijuana program in the state of Connecticut, and he ran it for the first couple of years of its existence. So I asked John if he would recommend, because we had questions, would you recommend that folks get a copy of the state form and then go through it? He said, no, that takes far too much time. If you've buried your nose in a form, you're not actually getting a sense of, do you feel comfortable about these folks? And he said what I had said earlier, the state is the only one that's qualified to conduct a state exam. So we worked with him, and his suggestion really was, have some high-level things that you look for so that your nose isn't buried in the paper, but you're having a conversation. You need to feel comfortable in that space. So look for things like making sure they have a license posted, making sure that you feel like it's safe, that there are no people consuming cannabis on site, that there's no one behind the, in the back, like children hanging out, anything like that, that you understand what is being sold. This is what John would recommend would be like the extent of a site visit for a dispensary. We also have an example of one for visiting like a grower. And if you're curious, we'd be happy to share examples with you. But I say this because I don't want you to feel overwhelmed by the notion of doing site visits. Site visits are really about you establishing your comfort level. Now, if you really do want to know what the state went through on its last exam, you can always request a copy of it from your CRB. I don't know of a state that does not provide a copy of the exam results to the cannabis business. There may be some exceptions, but it is absolutely something you can ask for. Can I have a copy of your last state exam? Stacy, do you have any comments there? Any thoughts?
No, I think you covered it very well. Although I might add that those of you that are new to the industry, going and visiting a cannabis facility may help you to really see the legitimacy of these businesses. I think there is some stigma and old perceptions around the industry where, you know, you go into the room and there's the beads hanging in the doors and the black light in the back room. It's not like that in a legal state program. These buildings and these facilities look like doctor's offices and spas and medical labs where they have, you know, beard guards and hair guards, and they're making sure they're not contaminating the product. And it's a pretty sophisticated operation in most cases. So I think if you have any concerns about the legitimacy of these businesses, go and stop by and call on a customer and ask. You might want to call ahead of time. There are some concerns around, you know, visiting people just wandering around a marijuana facility. And in some cases, you may need to have a medical card to even gain entry to the facility. So call ahead and make sure you understand what the rules are. But you know, stop in and see what they're doing. It's pretty fascinating.
So Stacy, would you say that an FI should do a site visit for every single CRB they bring up?
I don't. I don't. I think that particularly if you want to expand your program beyond your immediate footprint, that becomes not scalable, not manageable. To, you know, we have one client at Montana, and she spends weeks driving around to all of her businesses when she could simply, you know, request the state inspection form. There's also other ways that people got creative with around COVID where they couldn't physically be on site. So they do things like time-stamped photos of certain things that they're concerned about, the front of the facility, the counter of the facility. I mean, if there's something specific that you're looking for, there are other ways other than having to physically drive there. But, you know, I also understand that a lot of the business development folks like to pop in and say hello and talk to their clients like they would the car dealer or the plumber or anyone else. So if that's the style of the institution, then there's no harm in doing those site visits at all.
All right. So staffing needs, or we often hear, I need 1 FTE for every 10 CRBs. Now, this is one that I'm going to hand over to Stacy because this is, I get animated about this. So I'm going to let someone who is of cooler head handle this.
So when we think about how to run a program, if you are doing a manual program, yes, that requires more people. And for those institutions that have converted from manual programs to our software, you know, we always ask them, how many people were you managing? How many MRBs do you have? And that ratio of 10 to 15, maybe 20 at tops, is what we see in the manual world, because these folks are maintaining spreadsheets in order to find trends in the sales activity. They might be using, you know, multiple systems. Like, I'm going to look at the core system, I'm going to look at Verifin, I'm going to look at my spreadsheets, and I'm going to go to all these places where I, you know, pull data together, and it takes some time. They also, you know, if you're manually validating sales information, you're not just looking at a sales report and saying, well, they had 10,000 sales and 10,000 in deposits. You're looking in that sales report to see, well, what are they selling? And is that product legal in my state? And should I be worried about age verification? How do I know that? And that sort of thing. So there's a lot of effort that goes into a manual program. If we think about the SAR filing and CTRs, a lot of manual programs have the benefit of a core system or a Verifin or a Brigo or Yellowhammer triggering those SARs and CTRs, but there still needs to be the manual review of the trends and behaviors so that you know what to put in that SAR. You know, we talked a little bit earlier around gathering information about transactions. How do you do that in a manual program? So yes, if you're doing a manual program, you do need a fair amount of people to do that work. Another option for programs, and typically these are, you know, programs of maybe 10 and up, right? When you start getting into that 10, 15, 20 MRBs, you start to have a fair amount of work, and you might want to start thinking about some automation. There can be a number of efficiencies gained through using software. You can have workflows and license validation that's automated through a software tool. You can have sales validation. I'm particularly proud of our software, so I'm going to use it as an example here. We integrate with the point of sale and invoicing systems so that we're pulling in that sales data real time and running it against a compliance rules engine so that we can tell you whether or not those transactions are, whether or not they look good. And then in terms of ongoing due diligence and monitoring, if you're using software, that software is going to gather up all of that data for you. The software is going to highlight those trends and anomalies so that you can focus on analyzing the data rather than gathering the data. And then, of course, if you've got pre-filled and triggered CTRs and SARs, that's going to save you some time as well, especially around that transaction activity. So what does an automated program look like in terms of FTEs? If we go out into our client base, the folks that are using our software, they're managing somewhere between 60 and 80 MRBs per FTE. Although we do have one rock star who's somewhere around 100. I don't know how she does it, but her team does a fantastic job. But you know, I tend to use a number closer to that 60 mark because I like to be conservative. Yeah, I'm a banker at heart. So those numbers are very different with an automated program. So when you hear that, I need 10 people for, no, 10, one person for every 10 FTE MRBs, it's probably in relation to a manual program, not a program that's using automation to gain some efficiencies around the work that needs to be done.
And that's ultimately why I get animated. It's not gospel, and it's not a rule anywhere that you need one FTE per 10 CRBs. And that causes some financial institutions to just stop right there and say, well, I can't hire people, I can't bank cannabis. Really think about what you need, and are there ways that you can introduce efficiencies where you don't have to hire one person per 10 CRB. So I would encourage you really to think about, how would you do it today? Are there ways that you could be more efficient? So Stacy, before we wrap it up, do you want to talk again a little bit about GreenCheck?
Yeah, you know, I like to let everybody know, just the 30-second commercial. I know you guys have been with us for hours and we've given you a bunch of information, but I do want to let you know that we do have a software program that will help you around automation and giving you some technology solutions and helping you scale your program so that you can manage all of this in a nice central platform. And we support not only the direct MRBs, but we also allow you the ability to customize your due diligence profile so that you can have a different one for hemp and a different one for indirect and a different one for CBD. So if you're managing an entire program, you can do that all in one platform. I will also tell you that if you are new to cannabis and you want help developing that program, we do have some advisory services where we'll walk you through that risk assessment, financial modeling, marketing and operations discussion so that you can go to your board with a packet of information about the analysis and work that you've done to build a program and think about that decision and how it all works. So if you're interested in either us helping you build a program or automating one, certainly give us a ring. We're here to help.